welcome to the Green Way Outdoors Huntcast. We are up north in northern Michigan. Exciting times. November 15th. It's a Michigan holiday. I guess in some areas they close schools. Unfortunately, in the city they don't. But for the cool people that live what we call up north, which is anywhere near a lake or above this line, this is a holiday. And a lot of times school is closed. November 15th is the opening day of rifle season in Michigan, which is a 15-day season. And it starts November 15th and November 30th. I've been coming up to this area in northern Michigan since I was a little kid. And thanks to Pete Tomio and my dad for creating this environment that was perfect for a kid learning to hunt and fish and getting to come up here and harvest my first deer and my second and third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and so on and so forth. And just coming up here and having the camaraderie of all the guys up here. And Ryan, who's been with our show since basically the beginning, is often behind the gun on the camera, but not always, actually hunting.
Yeah.
So I was excited. I was able to harvest my deer quick this year, and you've never harvested a deer before.
No, I haven't. I've been deer hunting, but I've never been fortunate enough to harvest one.
Yeah, and that adds a little bit of a pressure to it too, because everyone sees you as the hunting guy. And the funny thing is, and AJ, our director, on all these hunting trips, you've been on hundreds of trips, but not always pulling behind the trigger. And I always said, I have this fantasy, and those of you who know who AJ from the podcast and stuff is, I picture everyone like a nuclear fallout of some sort, and then AJ is like this survivor who hunts and fishes all the time, even though he never does.
Yeah.
But because he knows so much from going on so many trips with us that
Yeah.
he's just like this ultimate survivor now. And I just have this idea of what that would be
Yeah,
like.
it's crazy because AJ wasn't necessarily a hunter, but I mean, at this point, with as many trips as we've been on, he could outperform most hunters. I really believe that.
And growing up, you were more apt to, your dad was really into upland game bird hunting.
Yeah, growing up, he grew up on a farm in Jackson, Michigan, which is really great deer hunting.
Yeah, that's like the mecca of deer hunting in Michigan.
Yeah, he had done plenty there growing up, and I think he just kind of outgrew it and got bored of it at some point just because deer hunting was so good.
Right.
And so when it was a few years before I was born, he started upland bird hunting pretty seriously, and then that's just pretty much what me and my siblings did for the most part.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really a strong attraction to it for us growing up. If we ever asked to go, he would absolutely take us,
right.
But we kind of always just wanted to go woodcock and grouse hunting with him.
Yeah, and that's, one of those things too where there's always action. You're always doing something. You're always hiking. You're always moving. You can shoot a few in a day as opposed to one deer and sitting there. And as a kid, man, I am someone who most people are like, I can't believe you're quiet while you're deer hunting. I can't believe you're just sitting there. I'm like white-knuckled excited, and I'm still that way even nowadays. And before we get to your awesome buck, because as it sits right now, not to spoil anything, but as it sits right now, you have the best buck at deer camp. So we'll start with my good buck, and then we'll move on to your great buck after that. We're also going to talk about what to do if you should gut shot a deer, and also the state of the world right now and how we're escaping it here.
Opening morning, we made our way to Kyle's pop-up blind. Dragging our feet through the snow, we were grateful for the weather due to the fact that the snow would help keep the forest quiet, as well as making deer easier to track. Unfortunately, we only saw some wildlife, none of which being deer that thoroughly impressed Kyle. As the weather started to warm and the snow started to melt, Kyle made the decision to move spots. Kyle's late-day blind has proven to provide deer in seasons past. After moving to the late-day blind and seeing multiple doe pass through, Kyle realized he had made the right call. Out of the woods came a healthy buck.
Now in this part of Michigan, you gotta have at least 3 antler points on one side, an antler point restriction area. This guy looks like a dandy little 6-point. That's what he is. This is gonna be a great eating deer. It's been slow, haven't seen much of anything. Just a couple small doe, a lot of turkeys. And this was the first nice deer I saw come through. It's a good 6-point. Nice little set of antlers on him. And a lot of good meat. This is perfect. Very happy with this. Awesome. You know, it's not just the idea of like, got to shoot a deer either. When you think about it, there's like almost nowhere else in the world that you can just go out at will and harvest a buck. You know, we're on our property, we buy licenses, we help with the Department of Natural Resources, we give back, but we get to come out and harvest. This is my meat now. I did this, and I can do this, and we live in a nation where we have that freedom, and it's a right that we have to protect because it's beautiful. I mean, I get to eat this, I get to put these antlers on my wall, I get to pass down this tradition, teach my kids to be sustainable, because God knows what can happen in the future, and they need to be able to protect themselves and harvest food and be able to do it themselves. And it's just this tradition, you know, this rich passion of the past that's still here today and still evident. And it's just, we live in a country where poor people can do this. You know what I mean? Like every other country, hunting is only for the rich, you know? And it's, anybody can do it. Get out and do it. This is awesome. That was exciting, and I would call that my smackdown hit. You know, a lot of people talk about aiming for the heart when they're shooting deer, and I can understand that for archery and everything else. But what I've noticed, and I'm sure this will ramp up the comments and get people to hate me, which is fine, is I'm a lung shot guy. Number one, I like to eat the heart, and the heart sits lower, and I believe that when you have the shock of a bullet hit, that shock wave, if it's more in the center of the body where the lungs are a little bit higher, a little bit more forward, when I seem to hit deer in the lungs, it knocks them over, and I think it's that shock, that hit, all in the center of the mass, knocking them over. And also, they don't run anywhere then, and that's exactly what you saw there. Hitting the heart, I mean, they'll run 100, 150 yards without a heart. You know, they're dead on wheels, but they're going still. So I'm a big fan of that. But that was an exciting hunt, but not quite as exciting as Ryan getting his first deer, and now we'll show you that.
So, from this far end of the field, 2 bucks walk in. Originally, we'd only seen the first one, which was relatively small, and the second one rolled in right after it. And they just kept coming closer and closer. And thankfully, the bigger one had enough points, turned broadside, and I shot at it, and it was the most perfect scenario.
On our second day, Kyle and I set out for my first deer. After Kyle's success on the day prior, we decided to sit in that same blind. On our walk out to the blind, we could make out the silhouettes of a few deer off in the distance, which was obviously a good sign. As shooting light neared and more deer started to move, we set eyes on 2 buck. Thankfully, Kyle was there to help coach me through the process, as this is the closest I've ever come to being able to shoot a deer. I pulled my gun up and got into position. After taking a few deep breaths in, I was ready to take the shot. Unfortunately, my shot wasn't as good as I had hoped.
I think I messed it up. I think I shot too far back on it.
It looks like reviewing the footage, it looks like you were exactly heart high, but back to the right a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, this is your first deer, so do you feel like you flinched, or do you feel like you were nervous, or like, what do you think? What do you think attributed to that?
I'm afraid what I did was I was expecting the gun to go off, and I pulled it. I think. I don't know if that, or I don't know.
That doesn't mean you won't get it. It means that, I'll be honest with you, the likelihood goes down. You know, when it's a gut shot is what they call it, because it's in the guts. But
went through and through. Hopefully we'll have some good blood. He ran like he was clearly hurt. A lot of times a gut shot deer will lay down like 100 yards away because he'll be like, let's go, if nothing's chasing him. And like, you know, the other deer after he shot was like unfazed. So hopefully he won't feel pressured. He'll just go somewhere, lay down, and we'll wait, you know, a couple hours, and then we'll go look for him. And hopefully by then he'll already be expired. We'll be able to get him some way, but
I hope so.
I know, dude, I'm sorry that happened in your first year.
What hurts the most, I think, is that it wasn't as clean and as quick as I would have liked to have seen it.
Kyle and I sat for a few more hours. Due to the poor placement of the shot, we needed to give the deer as much time as possible to pass. It's always unfortunate when something like this happens, which is all the more reason we need to do our best to recover the animal and show it the respect it deserves. So we called in backup and got to work.
The other one went that way. He went that way. They almost ran right into each other.
I got blood here, blood there,
Okay,
blood there, blood there.
So that tells me that's the spray through, right?
I would assume, so was he shot over there?
Yeah, it tells me that the blood scattered that way, so that means where he went in here could be. Yeah, I think there's tracks here, Pete. That looks like the hooves, and this is, so he went like this. I don't know, Ryan, that looks like a game trail. That might not be it. Yeah, barely, but there it is, blood.
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 Pee. Oh, he went this way. Look at all this. Those are,
Oh, Pete, come look at this. Come look at this.
these branches are covered in blood.
Dude.
Oh, that's awesome.
Get
He's
up there.
Fat.
That's a big deer. What a relief.
That's sweet.
That's all you, buddy.
Oh, he's stiff.
Yeah.
It's been sitting for a while. That's awesome.
Dude, you got an 8 point. No, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 point. That's awesome.
First year.
Dude, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's his first year ever.
Thank you, Pete.
That is so cool. Holy cow.
That's awesome.
Roughly an hour of tracking later, we had found my first deer. I was grateful to have people like Kyle and Pete with me to share their knowledge. A huge lesson to take away from this experience is to be willing to learn. Understand how to humble yourself and take advice from others. Because in the end, advice from your friends or loved ones is their way of showing you that they want you to be successful.
Congratulations, dude.
Thank you.
First deer.
I know, it was fun.
Did you have buck fever at all?
No.
No?
I mean, like, honestly, no.
Okay.
But I think what
What do you attribute that to?
hunting so much.
Yeah.
Like, we just got back from Colorado, and I wasn't, like, you shot the elk, but I had buck fever then.
Right.
Filming. But I think that was because that was such a cool animal I had never seen in person before.
I think
Like,
it's because they're so big.
yeah, everything about it was awesome. So I was kind of freaking out with that. But with the deer, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it was different. We've been on so many trips where I've seen it and I've been around it.
It didn't give you that buck fever.
I mean, it was definitely awesome. I loved it, and it was really great. Well, I mean, it was awesome, but I was also nervous about the outcome of it because of the shot I made,
Yeah.
which turned out to be okay.
Yeah, but realistically, you were off by 7 or 8 inches. That's what you were off by.
Yeah.
And that doesn't sound like a ton, but that's the difference between the deer stopping right there and the deer running. When he took off, and the way he took off, it was really hard. You saw the compression shock wave, and to me it looked like it was going to be low because it was like his abdomen disappeared.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, And then when he ran, he did have his tail down, which, I mean, we knew he hit, so that didn't matter. But a lot of times when a deer is running away from you, one of the things you can watch for is the tail. If it's down in between his legs and they're more or less running as opposed to bounding, if you will, with their tail up, that normally means that they're hit, is when that tail's down and they're running as opposed to bounding with their tail up. And when I saw it, I was like, my heart just sank. Because I'm like, no, because I was sitting with you and I was like, I do not want this to be the case for his first deer. You know what I mean? I was like, no. And that's kind of what we want to get to now. And we've summarized it a little bit in the actual trip itself. But when it comes to a gut shot deer, so let's say you just gut shot a deer, what should you do? And the first things first is, if you're bow hunting, take a look at your arrow. Finding your arrow gives you so much information about where that arrow went through the actual body. Looking at it, if you've got food and green bile or black or even poop or a smear on the actual arrow, or it reeks, it smells, it has a bad smell to it, that can be a pretty good indicator that you've made a gut shot. And a lot of times with an arrow too, I really like lighted nocks. When you have that arrow and it goes through and you're pretty sure it was a gut shot, let's say it's the morning hunt like we had today, what we did was we let it sit for almost 5 hours. We didn't even try and push it for 5 hours. Even with a rifle shot, we gave it 5 hours. We watched where it went, we stayed away from it, we snuck back out and came back in later on, and we left the woods really quiet. What'll happen is almost all, not all, but almost all bucks, does, whatever, if you shoot a deer and you gut shot it and you stay quiet and you don't disrupt anything and you weren't busted completely and they didn't know you were right there, a lot of times, almost all, they'll run 100 yards or less, find the quickest cover, and they'll hide. What happens is when you gut shot a deer, the sensations that they're going through are what you would equate to a big fever, very nauseous, very sick. And if you were nauseous, sick with a headache, you want to be in bed, tucked up, right? You and it's easy to assume that that's probably the same sensation that they're feeling. So they're going to go hide. Now, what'll probably happen is they'll lay down and die, whether it's their guts leaking into their system and them dying of that intoxication, if you will, septic. Septic shock of some sort. Yeah, or bleeding out. And if you don't push them and you let them lay down, they'll just never get up and pass. And then you can go in and find them that way. If you go in too early, you can push them. Now, if it's an afternoon hunt, let's say you do it right before dark, it's so hard to do, especially in an area where we have like coyotes. But your best bet is to leave it put overnight, and then come back the next day. You can't always do that, right? So maybe it's dark and like you got to work the next day and you're on state land and this and that. Try to give it at least a couple hours, because what's going to happen is hopefully they'll lay down and pass. What'll happen if you don't, if you go early, let's say you got to go for it, what you're likely to do is bump the deer. And what the deer will do as a terrified last-ditch effort is they will run as far as they possibly can away from you, because now they believe they're being pursued. Yeah. They will go as far as they possibly can until they can't go any farther. And a lot of times that's miles.
That's a lot farther than you want to go.
Yeah, and when you take into account of like land and boundaries and places where you can go, it very well could go off of where you're able to.
Yeah, it's not very often someone has miles of land for themselves to like go walk around on. So it's likely if you do bump a injured deer with a gut shot, it's likely going to go onto someone else's land.
Yeah, and then you're dealing with a whole lot of issues there. So we use OnX to know exactly where we are, and then getting all the landowners if you need to go on other land. But letting them sit for that overnight is your best bet. Go out at first light, but be prepared. When you go out, have your gun ready. Know where your party is, who's with you. And like when we were walking out, I said, okay, if we're in thick brush when we were looking for ears, I said, all right, we're lined up in 3 and we're all pushing the same direction. No one shoot past 10 or 2 o'clock on either side, and we're all pushing in together, all wearing hunter orange, all being safe, so that you're not firing in a brush area, but being very ready that deer could get up and you might have to make a quick shot to finish him off. Yeah. But that's what you should do if you have a gut shot. Don't feel terrible about it. It's not. It's something that happens to everyone. No one makes perfect shots. It's important to be proficient. It's important to practice. All those things are very important. But those are also things that, this stuff happens. And just like you with your first deer, you're off by 7 or 8 inches. Yeah. And that's all the difference in the world. And that can be tough. But yeah, that's what to do in that situation.
And shooting it properly in the right area and not shooting it in the guts, it makes the gutting process a lot nicer and easier.
Yeah, how was that, by the way?
My stomach doesn't usually get sick, so I wasn't too bothered by it, but it wasn't pleasant by any means, especially reaching up in there to grab everything out. It was not thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, that's actually a good point too on the letting them lie. One of the things too is like we have that niceness of the fact that it's 30 degrees here at night. In warm areas you can't always leave them overnight.
Yeah.
You worry about meat spoiling, and that sort of thing. But realistically, if you bump the deer, then you won't get anything. So.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think we made the right move with just sitting, waiting it out, and making sure there was no chance that we bumped him or scared him off again, because I would highly doubt we would have retrieved that deer had we just pressured him right away.
Interestingly enough, though, he was rigor mortis completely after 4 hours.
Yeah, which makes you think he died
relatively quick.
Yeah.
He was also not under anything.
Yes.
So that also leads me to believe that I think you got some lung. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think, and when we got it, and we saw you did.
Yeah.
But.
And then, like when we were tracking him, when we went to the spot where I shot him, and there was hardly any blood. You saw some splatter, but I mean it was difficult to spot.
Right.
And the farther we followed this blood trail, the more and more blood. And then we got into the woods, and then all the branches were covered in blood.
When we hit that one branch that looked like it was painted,
yeah.
and it was good height. I was really excited about that.
Yeah. I mean that made me a lot happier to see, knowing that
an injury
it was a
up
much more
high,
fatal
bleeding.
shot. Yeah, exactly.
I swear he had to have stood there against that branch for a second, though.
There was a lot of blood.
When he went into the woods, he was hauling.
Yeah.
I mean, he was hauling.
Like you said, like he was kind of doing this bounding thing into the woods, which made us think like it wasn't so good.
His tail was down, though.
Yeah, and so I mean, my hopes weren't too high after reviewing the footage and seeing that. But then once we were actually tracking it and we saw that, I'm like, okay, this is looking a lot better.
Yeah, the snow helps.
Oh, for sure.
Because the first drops would have been tough to find in grass.
In that field, where I shot it to the woods, it would have been insanely difficult to find blood.
Yeah, you've been on hands and knees and
Yeah.
pulling a full squanto out there. But now with that, the coolest part about this is that we're sitting here talking about your first deer, and we're talking about harvesting our own meat and how amazing that was. And I said in my part, I went on a little bit of a rant with my deer there about how important it is that, like, in this country we can do that. And that's the case, man. Like, we're so lucky to be here. And just like we're so lucky to be here right now, what's going on in the rest of the world, we're facing, we just got word that as of Wednesday, we'll have more shutdowns. It's November 16th, 2020 right now, and we're facing more shutdowns to COVID. And regardless of when you see this video, and hopefully learn from the gut shot part, the world is a really weird place. And the shutdowns and all of this craziness that is going on right now over the course of the year, your poor sister, she's 17 years old, 16 years old?
17.
17 years old, and she'll never know what a normal high school life is like.
No, I mean, after this year, she will have missed almost over a quarter of what high school was actually like.
Right. And that's the worst part is like her, junior and senior year, when homecoming and prom and all these exciting things that they won't get to experience. Up here, though, we're away from it. You know what I mean? It's like the life is the same here because the life has always been the same here, right? It's so pure up here. We're hunting and harvesting our own food. We're going out and having all these awesome experiences. We've got the camaraderie. No one's watching TV. There's 12 guys in the living room at night, and we're telling deer stories and enjoying all that fun time and the camaraderie and laughing and staying up late and waking up early and getting deer and eating hearts and tenderloins and livers and having a blast and doing like what's in us to do. You know what I mean? And it feels so natural and great. And then to like look at your phone and then see all the stuff that's going on back home. Yeah. It's like, man, it's just simpler and quieter up here.
It's great up here, and it's nice to be around people. But from like the hunting aspect of it, you, in a sense, become more appreciative of the fact that you know how to do those sorts of things, like hunt a deer or whatever it might be.
Right.
Because after all this whole COVID thing, you realize how fragile things really can be.
The Green Way Outdoors is brought to you by Ram Trucks, built to serve. Motor Trend's Truck of the Year for the third year in a row. And by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Your adventure starts here. And by Tracker Boats. Fish the best.
To think that our economy, and this is not necessarily a political thing, but in 2011, from 2008, I think it was, to 2011, our national debt doubled. And to a lot of people, like, what does that matter? But all the presidents combined leading up to 2008, all of them combined pulled in maybe $10 trillion in debt roughly, and now it doubled that. Well, we owe those money to countries. So if they call our debt, what does that mean?
Right.
For national security, what does that mean for our resources? What does that mean for what we have to do to pay that debt? And the real issue is, that security and that fear. Imagine having that debt called. Imagine these big wars between the right and the left and all these things that could happen and all this terribleness. You do realize with COVID, shut down, I can't go to restaurants again. I can't go to a restaurant. I can't do all these things. The grocery stores, I don't know what the repercussions will be. Will we run out of toilet paper again?
Right.
Will that be the next big thing? But these events that have been taking place do show how fragile everything is. And I can't tell you how many people to me are like, dude, honestly, I'm a little I want to know how to hunt and fish and get my own food and stuff like that. And it becomes a thing.
I've had that a few times also. It's like half joke, half serious, where it's like, oh, I'm coming to your house when things go down. It's like, well, maybe you should just learn how to do some of these. It's not really that hard. It just takes a little bit of time.
Right.
And I think everyone should at least kill a deer at some point in their life, or harvest some sort of animal, and you grow a greater appreciation for everything that's around you. And
it's also like when we're gutting ours today, you said it's like a giant, what did you say it was, a giant?
I said it was like the giant version of the pheasant, like the way everything.
So you're looking
came
at
out.
a whitetail deer and saying it's like a giant version of pheasant, which it's because everything from the esophagus to the butthole is connected.
Yeah.
Everything's connected, and you're pulling all that out, and that's essentially the goal, right?
Yeah.
And but that's the truth. And if you go out and you harvest a deer and you learn to have the understanding of like where your food comes from, it's really strange. But like, you go to the movie theater and you order chicken tenders, which I know you do, and you get a thing of chicken tenders, and you sit there and you eat chicken, and it never crosses your mind that was a chicken that was walking around, that was slaughtered, that was gutted, that was deboned, and then prepared and fried by somebody else that handled your food the whole way. It's like, I don't like anyone handling my anything. You know what I mean?
And it's
not anything, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. And it's sad to see so many people like how far they've disassociated from where their food actually comes from. Like, when I have pictures on my phone of us gutting an animal or just a dead animal, and it's not necessarily gory or anything, they turn away and go, "Oh, don't show me that." I'm like, "Well,
everything you eat, everything you eat.
You eat meat. Why? Like, you can't understand how this works?" And they're like, "I don't want to know. I don't want to know." Well, like, that might get you in trouble one day.
And that's the thing, is now we're seeing that there could be a point in time where it could get you in trouble one day.
Yeah.
And now you can even see the path to get there. And I feel like it's unveiling something where people are like curious now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're like, okay, so what now? You do what with the deer? And then and what do they taste like? How do you cook it? You know?
No, I have actually been like confronted and like asked about those sorts of things.
Right.
And I mean, I try to be as pleasant as possible and try to get them into it, but it's just sad to see so many people have just like thrown it out the window up until now, once things start to get a little rough.
We're a little lucky with our parenting too, though, that we had our
we grew up in good families who taught us these sorts of things.
And
thankfully,
godly lessons, so that was definitely helpful. But yeah, it's kind of cool to be up here and disconnect, but it's weird to think of going back home and dealing with the chaos and everyone's so stressed, and up here it's just like, shoot some deer, come in, we'll cook them up, if come hell or high water, if we ever have a big disaster, this is where we'll be coming. Even though the only one to survive will be AJ, and he will be he'll be living the high life, knowing all the lessons that we've taught him. He probably won't trout fish though. I don't think he's ever gonna like that. But thank you so much for tuning into the Green Way Outdoors Huntcast. We hope you enjoyed this deer special. I know we had a blast, and we're gonna go continue to have more fun. My dad's still out in the woods. Pete's still out in the woods. Our buddy Ken's still out in the woods, and I'm hoping to get a phone call so that I can go help them clean some more deer and drag some deer in and get some more venison for the freezer. For recipes, go to thegreenwayoutdoors.com. There's a lot of cool venison recipes there, including an orange recipe, meaning like orange chicken or orange beef, like when you go to Chinese food, but with orange venison. And we used axis deer for it, but you can use any deer for it. That, I kid you not, is so good, and you need to try it. So visit thegreenwayoutdoors.com. Special thanks to Weatherby for supplying us with the best guns to knock these deer down. And you got to use the 270 for the first time.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It's a beast of a gun. Special thanks to Ram Trucks for giving us the vehicle we needed to get the deer out of the woods.
Yep.
And Bass Pro Shop and Cabela's for giving us
keeping us warm.
the coolest apparel
Thank
on the
goodness.
planet. Yeah, no kidding. It was a little cold.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, and no sponsorship needed, but Mr. Buddy, thank you for existing. Because
Yeah, exactly.
That heater is everything. So thanks so much for tuning in. Stay green.